You target those weeds when they're small. The grass needs to be at tillering stage and the clover about 3 trifoliate leaves on it. And at this stage, the weeds will probably be only 3 to 4 inches high. You target them weeds and eliminate them. And if you can eliminate the docks at that stage and kill out that root of that dock, you can eliminate that dock, allow the grass to grow. You can prevent a lot of docks coming back in that field, possibly for 3, 4, 5 years.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Ciaran Egan, and on this week's joint episode with Ovicast, I'm joined with host Ciaran Lynch, sheep specialist, and Maughan Technical Manager with Whelehan Crop Protection to discuss weed control and planning for the year ahead. Chris, grass growth has been hampered this spring and it's been a very cold, wet start to the year and grass has been struggling, but docks are still growing away. What are the options for controlling docks this spring?
You are correct. It has been a sort of a cold, wet spring. However, docks are still growing away at the moment. I suppose if you're going to control docks, maybe in silage ground, it's important maybe to have the fertilizer on. That's probably done at this stage. Fields are harrowed and rolled, but the docks are starting to grow. Ideally, you want to be targeting the docks when they're 8 to 10 inches higher across. That's the rosette stage, we call that. Nice when they're green and healthy. And this is important in order to get the spray onto the dock to get down and kill out that root. One of the things with docks is that they have a very large taproot, which can grow up to 1 meter deep. So it's important to get the spray, especially the systemic sprays, onto that grass to allow it to get down and to kill out that root. The other thing to watch as well when you're spraying docks is to use plenty of water. It's important to get good coverage when you're using a product, especially something like Dockstar Pro. You want to get the spray onto the leaf to allow it to get down to kill out that root. Say grass and silage ground. A lot of people tend to be afraid maybe to put sprays on at this time of the year because they don't want to knock the grass. But the one thing is the likes of Dockstar Pro is quite safe on the grass. So you don't need to worry about it knocking back the grass. Dandelions are another weed which is starting to show at the moment. They tend to be yellow in the field there currently. So most of the dock killers like the Dockstar Pro will kill out dandelions as well.
And Chris, from a crop yield point of view, what impact can docks have on a silage crop?
Yeah, look, docks tend to be bad news in grass. They compete for both light and nutrients in the soil, and they can have a direct effect on yield. And work that would have been done by Teagasc would have found that if you have like a 10% dock infestation, that can reduce your grass dry matter yields by 10%. So if you have 20 or even 30% dock infestation, that'll reduce your grass dry matter yields by 30%. But not alone that, docks also affect silage fermentation and the quality of the silage. And especially, say, for later cut silage, you can get a lot of stems as well. Silage that's cut maybe into June. Docks get very strong, and those stems can puncture a lot of bale silage as well. So you can get a loss there. So it is important to control them early. Like docks in silage ground tend to be worse than silage ground, maybe. And that's because silage ground has an open sward, more open. It tends to get, say, skint when you cut silage, and the docks tend to come up through that, early, certainly after the first cut silage. So, look, it is important to eliminate them in silage ground because then you will get better quality grass and more of it.
Is there an ideal time now in the silage crop to apply sprays for docks, or how soon close to harvesting would you avoid spraying?
I suppose, look, the ideal time is to spray now. You were sort of the middle of April now, coming to the end of April, you would spray now. Generally, in grazing ground, you're leaving them a week afterwards, sort of before you graze them. But in silage ground, we like to spray the docks at least 3 weeks before you cut them. And that's to allow time for the chemical to get down and to kill out that root. So it takes time for the chemical to get down to kill out that large taproot that I mentioned earlier that can be up to 1 meter deep.
Chris, that's possibly where it goes wrong in certain cases, is left too late and docks can reappear later in the season.
No, correct. And that's the thing. The other thing you want to watch as well is, we mentioned there the timing. You want to get them when they're green and leafy. You want to avoid waiting till the seed head appears. When docks produce a seed head, a lot of the nutrients go up the plant produce in seed, and less of the chemical is taken down to kill out that root. So look, most of the chemicals will kill the docks that are there, but really it's about long-term control and killing out that large root. So that's why it's really important to use plenty of water, spray the dock when it's green and healthy and nice and leafy. Leave it at least 3 weeks then before you cut the silage to allow time for that chemical to get down and kill out the root.
Chris, in terms of, when you touched on grazing garlic docks, obviously one of the challenges we have others there like thistles and some of the general weeds. Probably a good time of year to get in and tackle those as well early in the season that doesn't restrict growth. What are the control options there?
Yeah, look, as you mentioned, thistles there tends to be a problem in a lot of ground as well. There's two main types of thistles that farmers need to remember. We have the creeping thistle that grows in clumps in a field and sort of spreads out every year, gets bigger and bigger. And it grows by rhizomes underneath the ground, so it has a massive root structure. And that's why it's important to use a systemic chemical to get down and kill out that root. And you also have the spear thistle or the buck thistle. That's an individual plant. It grows as a single plant with a taproot. And you often see that growing under fence lines and stuff. They'd be present there at the moment, and they're actually starting to get quite big now, some of them. It's a biannual plant, and that means in the first year it grows as a small rosette. And when it overwinters and starts to grow now, it gets quite large and can be up to 1 meter in diameter. And that grows away there, and you see that a lot under fences. Look, it's important to kill them as well. And we do have a new product on the market called Teagasc Pro, which is a systemic killer which will get down and kill out creeping thistle and the spear thistle. But you mentioned a lot of grazing grounds, there may be more weeds than just docks. There may be thistles, nettles as well. So there is an option there, like something like 4-Front-T, which would be a very broad spectrum herbicide that'll kill a lot of those weeds, nettles, thistles, docks, dandelions, buttercups, and other weeds there. And it's ideal for using in grazing ground.
There's a significant increase in the prevalence of ragwort on farms in recent years. Chris, what's the best options when it comes to ragwort control?
Ragwort, you do need to watch in grazing ground, all right. It grows, as you know, from a rosette and then grows up and flowers out, and you have that yellow flower in the field. The one thing to remember when you're spraying ragwort is to target it at the rosette stage. Now, generally, cattle and horses won't eat ragwort when it's growing. However, when it gets sprayed and it tends to die and decay, it becomes more palatable. It gets sweeter, and the animals will actually dig it out and look and eat it. So it's really important that when you spray ragwort that you do not graze that field until the ragwort is totally dead and decayed and gone out of the field. So ideally then you want to be targeting the ragwort when it's small at the rosette stage, maybe 5 or 6 inches in diameter, and before it begins to produce the stem. At that early stage, it'll die off much quicker and decay away. However, if you wait till it starts to grow and produce a stem, there's a lot more dry matter in it, and it'll take an awful lot longer for that ragwort to die away and decay. So you could end up waiting maybe 5, 6, even up to 8 weeks for that ragwort to die and decay. So it's really important to target it early. This is the time of the year for doing it. It's ideal now. There's nice warmer temperatures coming. There's two sort of products that really control ragwort. You've got 2,4-D, which would be in products like D50, or you've got aminoperlide, which would be in a product like 4-Front-T. So both those products will do quite a good job at controlling ragwort.
Chris, probably one of the challenges in a lot of the sprays we talked about there is they're not clover friendly. For somebody who has a lot of clover established in swards and put in that effort over the years, or even new leys, what are the control options there for weed control?
Yeah, look, in a new ley, when a farmer sows it and disturbs all the soil, what's going to happen is a lot of stock seeds or weed seeds that are there are going to come up in that new reseed. And they can affect the germination of the grass seeds coming then. So you'd have weeds like chickweed, which can be a serious problem in new leys, especially common chickweed. It can grow as a large mat on the ground and can totally smother out grass seedlings. So you don't want that to happen. Even other weeds like red shank fat hen, in certain situations, they can be quite plentiful and can smother out and stop the grass seedlings germinating. So it's important to get in early and eliminate those small annual weeds which then allows the grass to grow, to tiller away, and to get established. But also docks as well can be a serious problem in new leys. So you can have docks coming from seed or docks coming from old root fragments that were there beforehand. And it can be very difficult to control these as well. So we'd certainly recommend to target a new sown ley with a herbicide about 5 to 6 weeks after you sow it. So you go in with a product, say like Proclova XL, you target those weeds when they're small. The grass needs to be at the tillering stage and the clover about 3 trifoliate leaves on it. And at this stage, the weeds would probably be only 3 to 4 inches high. You target them weeds and eliminate them. And if you can eliminate the docks at that stage and kill out that root of that dock, because at that stage, growing from seed, it's probably only 3, 4, 5 inches big. You can eliminate that dock, allow the grass to grow. You can prevent a lot of docks coming back in that field, possibly for 3, 4, 5 years.
So early hitting in that case would be important. Chris, I suppose, look, another aspect of clover is those are thinking about getting it in or establishing next year. There's a bit of planning ahead in it as well. A lot of that weed control needs to be done this season if we're going to have successful establishment next year.
No, correct. I know a lot of farmers would go out and spray their fields with glyphosate or Roundup before they reseed, and that is really important to eliminate the grass weeds. However, it is more difficult to control the perennial weeds with Roundup. So weeds like thistle and dock and nettles are more difficult to control even with high rates of Roundup. So what we would recommend was to go and maybe eliminate those perennial weeds the year beforehand. So go in with something like 4-Front-T, eliminate those weeds then the root structure of the thistles and the docks and the nettles. So then the following year, when you go to reseed, you're only targeting weeds coming from seed. Because if you cut up or chop up a dock in a field, that root structure is viable, and it's more difficult to control the root docks going from roots than it is from seed. And then also thistle. Unfortunately, there's nothing that's clover safe for controlling thistles in new sown leys. So it's important to eliminate the creeping thistle, especially in the year in advance. So like you say, field that you're hoping to reseed, you could actually spray it now at this time of the year with something like 4-Front-T. However, you would have to wait maybe 10 to 12 weeks afterwards before you incorporate the clover. So there would still be time within the season to do that, but ideally you would be spraying it the year before, sort of planning ahead to eliminate those perennial weeds in the field a year in advance.
Okay, so still a bit of time there for somebody considering an autumn reseed if they get ahead now in the next week or two. Otherwise, it's a year. Look, I suppose same applies, Chris, for multi-species forage. You really have to have that weed control done the season prior.
No, correct, yeah. Multi-species and red clover swart is the other thing as well. There's limited in the products you can use there too. So it is important to sort of plan ahead, eliminate perennial weeds a year in advance. Then your Roundup will look after your grass weeds, and then hopefully you go and it would be a little easier to control those weeds coming from seed.
Chris, look, with all the sprays, how we set up the sprayer obviously is important in terms of the rate we go with and the amount. Even though another aspect we probably don't think about is the nozzles we have on the sprayer, and maybe the type of water we're using in that sprayer. Can that have an impact as well?
Absolutely. Well, obviously, first, it's very important the sprayers are tested, and they do need to be tested every 3 years to make sure that they're working right. Water volume is important. You need to use plenty of water. A minimum of 200 litres of water per hectare is required. And for some products like DocStar Pro, you require 300 litres of water to give you enough coverage. You mentioned then nozzles. They're important too. Most sprayers are fitted with a standard flat fan nozzle. But ideally, you should be using a low drift nozzle or an air induction nozzle. And what these nozzles do is they make a little bubble out of the droplet, put a little bit of air inside it, which creates a heavier droplet. So you get less drift, less of it blown away into the atmosphere, and you get better contact and stickability when it hits the actual weed then. So air induction, low drift nozzles are really important. And then you mentioned water quality. One thing that a lot of people forget is hard water, which is water with a lot of calcium in it, can affect a lot of the sprays. So the cations in the water can lock onto the spray and make it not work in a sense. So using hard water from a well can reduce the efficacy of the spray. So it's important to use soft water, say water from a river or Ruth, or to use a product like Aquascope for use with hard water, and that sort of neutralizes the water, and then when the spray gets put in, then it can work and do its job.
That's great, Chris. So when it comes to best practice, to improve water quality, what should farmers be conscious of when using sprays?
Yeah, look, I suppose the first thing is that, like the low drift nozzle, which we mentioned there, is important, so you have less drift. Buffer zones are important to watch as well. So all herbicides must be kept at least 3 meters away from a water course. And in most situations, that's not too bad. Your fence might be 1.5 meters out already, so you just keep another 1.5 meters out for that. That's important too. And then best practice in disposing a lot of the sprays and cans afterwards is important to watch. So we recommend to triple rinse the can, empty it back into your sprayer, invert that can and let it dry. And those cans then can be disposed of with your farm plastic collection dates during the year. It costs very little to recycle them at those events.
And when it comes to the user part, the personal protective equipment that's used by the user to avoid any health and safety issues on the farm, that's also critical.
Look, it is indeed, and some of that detail is on the spray label as well, so it's important to read that. So simple things like using nitrile gloves, using maybe a spray suit. Face shield is important too, that you don't get splashes up into your eyes and face as well. So simple things like that are important to follow.
Perfect, Chris. Look, that was a really good update today. Certainly something we need to consider at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Ciaran and Chris for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Ciaran Lynch and thanks for listening.